On behalf of the school board, I want to reiterate our strong support for our transgender students and staff in light of the draft model policy for Virginia schools released last Friday. We issued a statement supporting our transgender students on Monday, and we will continue to act in the best interest of our students and staff. This proposal does not reflect our values here at Arlington Public Schools and would change how transgender, non-binary, and gender-fluid students and staff are treated in our schools. These proposed policies would roll back crucial protections APS and other school divisions have recently put in place to ensure our LGBTQIA+ students and staff feel safe, valued, and welcome at school. APS will continue to adhere to our non-discrimination policy adopted in June 2017 and updated in 2019 to include transgender students and establish policy implementation procedures for schools to follow in supporting transgender students. We will abide by current federal and state law to ensure all students are treated with dignity and respect while having equal access to a quality education. To learn and grow, students must first feel safe, connected, and supported at school, free to express themselves. This is fundamental to education. I encourage our community to make your voices heard by participating in the 30-day public comment period for this draft, which starts on Monday, September 26th. You can visit townhall.virginia.gov, that's townhall, all one word, .virginia.gov, to view the open comment forums and provide your feedback when it opens on Monday. We will continue to engage with students, staff, and the community on this issue. This is a time to stand together and speak out.
Got any room up there for me, Charlie? Give us a hand, Charlie.
Major, what are you doing here?
Individuals with their personal expressions. I'd like to turn to our superintendent, Dr. Duran, for comment.
According to a memorial article that had appeared in People magazine back in June, the onslaught continued for hours. By the time the gunman was killed after 5 a.m., he had killed 49 people and injured another 58. It was the worst mass shooting in U.S. history until the 2017 Las Vegas shooting just a year later. It was the worst shooting in history and remains the deadliest attack against LGBTQ plus people in U.S. history. And 6 years later, victims, families, and survivors are still grappling with their trauma and finding ways to heal. Hello, my name is Major Mike Webb, and as a former operations officer for All Army Strategic Counterintelligence in the continental United States, I have had just a little bit of experience with these types of mass violence tragedies. Having had the unique opportunity to stand up the operations cells in response to the Oklahoma City federal bombing, and a year later for the pipe bombing in the Centennial Village at the Summer Olympic Games in Atlanta. And I was struck by familiar themes in both the Las Vegas shooting and the traumatic events at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. Tragedies that at least those employed in security would hopefully learn from to avoid, or at least make more difficult to recur in the future, averting the mass tragedy next time. And I have the opportunity to present a few suggestions contemporaneously to government authorities after those events in the past. But for the next few minutes, while we are preparing for a new round of litigation and legal efforts that are somewhat related in the field of public safety, albeit connected more to the pandemic to prevent the pandemic next time, we shall endeavor to impart from years of experience an examination of the breakthrough infections that had occurred in nightclubs in Provincetown, Massachusetts, affecting most adversely gay men, which are in fact very similar to the events that had occurred at the Pulse nightclub on June 12, 2016. An ounce of prevention, it is often said, is worth a load of care, just as most would probably agree with the suggestion that knowledge is power. And in the field of intelligence, which was my specialty area for the majority of my military career, we had often said that intelligence drives the mission cycle, a notion that even the military strategist Sun Tzu had embraced in his thought that a battle is won before it is even ever thought. And that's why we spend many weeks in Fort Huachuca, Arizona, learning a process called intelligence preparation of the battlefield, looking at the terrain, looking at the capabilities of the enemy, looking at our own assets, so that we could be ready to fight tonight. And certainly you have heard of planned terrorist acts being disrupted while still in an inchoate planning stage. And one way in which we are able to accomplish that is that professionals examining terrorist attacks in the past at places like the Department of Homeland Security, where I also spent some time, have been able to determine that even though to the victims and others, these violent attacks with the confusion and disarray of the present moment are taken precedence in their minds and focus. Very seldom are these spontaneous actions by terrorists who conduct them, and are actually the result of rather deliberate and well-developed planning, which, in addition to the chaotic shock of violence of action, places the terrorist at a distinct advantage over those around him, his victims, who are simply reacting, allowing them free range of maneuver because they are dictating the terms of the engagement or have seized the initiative to exploit. For in battle, it is often said that fortune favors the bold. And whether you look at the terror attacks on 9/11 or the recent events in Uvalde, just as in Las Vegas and at the Pulse nightclub, initially the victims, as well as law enforcement, arrived waking up surprised. They had to find out what was going on. Why were they at a disadvantage? Because they did not have the opportunity to interdict the terrorists during that 8-stage planning cycle, which typically includes prior surveillance. They've probably been there before, where the terrorists will taste the joint, as they say, so that they don't wake up surprised or get lost or encounter some obstacle that will disrupt their ability to conduct a successful operation. Imagine what would have occurred on January 6th had the persons who had entered the Capitol gotten lost in the labyrinthine maze of stairwells and corridors, and even find some congressman getting lost in there every day. A terrorist is probably going to engage in elicitation to gain more information from unsuspecting persons inside. This is why we have SAIDA briefings in the Army and talk about OPSEC, because persons may try to gain information through mail, email, telephone, or in person. And some may recall from the movie Charade how Walter Matthau was able to determine when one government office was entirely empty during the lunch hour to enable him to fool Audrey Hepburn's character into believing he actually worked there. A terrorist is probably going to engage in probing to test the systems of security. And quite a few crime caper movies have provided a great visual, like The Italian Job, where they were able to determine that if they could manage to keep tripping the alarm, eventually the security staff would ignore it, as if it was some glitch, and permit them free rein to maneuver, to pull off the operation and get away with the heist. Nothing is free, even for the fellows in Ocean's 11. So there is most often a funding step to solicit donations from other sources, if only to proceed to the next step of purchasing the necessary supplies, which may even include disguises and uniforms to present the appearance that they fit in with everybody else. And before actual deployment, I can assure you that even special operations in the military conduct rehearsals for something as simple as jumping from a perfectly good airplane. Just as the Navy SEALs had conducted months of rehearsals before spending just 43 minutes on the ground, 22 minutes inside the compound at a Abbottabad. Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast, like they say in the movie. But because most persons in Las Vegas were just doing what people do in Las Vegas, nobody noticed what was practically an arsenal being loaded into 2 hotel rooms. Just like at the Pulse nightclub, nobody noticed a person in body armor, armed with a 3-foot assault rifle and a firearm, powerful firearm, until something happened that violently stopped the music. And hours later, many were dead. But considering events in Provincetown, a really intelligent terrorist may decide to let the party go on, sneak in and sneak out after delivering a sufficient quantity of infectious virus through the air that the partiers were breathing, not noticing, more focused on dancing, drinking, and enjoying themselves, and would not realize that they had even been infected until at least 2 to 5 days later. That would be the perfect crime, right? And that is what we call bioterrorism, which is nothing like that scene in Outbreak where Kevin Spacey catches the virus and immediately starts to experience symptoms. That rarely happens when you have a biological agent. However, that may occur when it is chemical or nuclear. According to the July 2021 issue for the Mortality and Morbidity Weekly Report, MMWR, a publication produced by the CDC, with which you may be familiar after 2 years of pandemic, during July 2021, 469 cases of COVID-19 associated with multiple summer events and large public gatherings in a town in Barnstable County, Massachusetts, were identified among Massachusetts residents. Vaccination coverage among eligible Massachusetts residents was 69%. Approximately 3/4, 346, or 74%, of the cases occurred in fully vaccinated persons, those who had completed a 2-dose course of mRNA vaccine, Pfizer BioNTech or Moderna, or had received a single dose of Johnson & Johnson vaccine greater than or equal to 14 days before exposure. And for most laypersons who have now been through over 2 years of pandemic, this may sound completely like what might be expected at a super spreader event. And now, even breakthrough infections find many unconcerned because they have come to accept as a fact that no vaccines are perfect, but they have an extra layer of protection. But at least by this early report from CDC, there were 459 residents who were just having a good summertime under a sense of false security that they were safe, and woke up surprised to discover that they were not safe, believing that if they were vaccinated, fully vaccinated, they had not a care in the world until havoc struck and woke them from a sense of stupor. And you don't want to be that guy in a lethal pandemic, not knowing from where the attack might come, which is why, at least in intelligence, we traditionally have tried to gain a clear threat picture. to see the enemy coming before he can get a good shot at us. And that would, at least to a reasonable person, sound like an optimal solution for the problem of surprise infection, right? So let's return to the scene of the crime, as it was reported almost contemporaneously, to discern what clues might help us in future similar potential outbreaks to catch the virus red-handed before it catches you in the outbreak next time. According to the CDC, during July 3rd to the 17th, 2021, multiple summer events and large public gatherings were held in a town in Barnstable County, Massachusetts, that attracted thousands of tourists from across the United States. And for most, like residents in Ithaca today, who were concerned about returning students to Ithaca College and Cornell University, another case that we are now working on, the idea of mass introduction of new people to an area would suggest a potential for new infections and spread. It just seems to make common sense. And according to the CDC, beginning July 10th, the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, MADPH, received reports of an increase in COVID-19 cases among persons who reside in or recently visited Barnstable County, including fully vaccinated persons. Persons with COVID-19 reported attending densely packed indoor and outdoor events at venues that included bars, restaurants, guest houses, and rental homes. On July 3rd, MADPH had reported a 14-day average COVID-19 incidence of 0 cases per 100,000 persons per day in residents of the town in Barnstable County. By July 17th, the 14-day average incidence increased to 177 cases per 100,000 persons per day in residents of the town. And again, if the thought is that if you are in a pandemic and new people arrive and violate social distancing, this is what should occur, notwithstanding the potential for breakthrough infections. And in fact, just a month before, in June 2021, I had proposed to the former Governor Ralph Northam that celebrating Pride Month in the traditional way during a pandemic was not a wise idea, and tried to enjoin him by going to court to stop him from basically having what happened in Provincetown occur. But he was a doctor and he decided that everything was okay, and now we know that we have breakthrough infections. According to the CDC, during July 10th to the 26th, using travel history data from the state COVID-19 surveillance system, MADPH identified a cluster of cases among Massachusetts residents. That means that they are all connected to the same place. Additional cases were identified by local health jurisdictions through case investigation. Those are your trace contact follow-ups. COVID-19 cases were matched with the state immunization registry. These events had occurred in July 2021. And by that time, the Delta variant had become the predominant strain, the most contagious virus that Dr. Rochelle Walensky would later say she had ever seen in her 20 years of practice. Up there with chickenpox and measles, which are both validated 90% infections. We still don't have that number on COVID-19. We have R0, which is not a rate and which generally is not used to measure transmissibility risk. But if we are comparing chickenpox and measles to the Delta variant, that's pretty much at the wall and it can't get very much more transmissible. And at that time, the CDC reported in July 2021, the SARS-CoV-2 Delta variant is highly transmissible. And understanding determinants of transmission, including human behavior and vaccine effectiveness, is critical to developing prevention strategies. Multi-pronged prevention strategies are needed to reduce COVID-19 related morbidity and mortality. This is what they said: vaccine effectiveness. However, if you go back to the August 23rd, 2021 approval, the final approval of the Pfizer vaccine by the FDA for private label marketing, the only thing that had been done, even at that point, was a mere preprint of an efficacy study, which is distinct from an effectiveness test that is normally required for FDA approval. Efficacy, it was also the standard that was used for the emergency use authorization. The vaccine products that these persons who were infected in Provincetown had been using, they were using vaccines that were tested under an efficacy test and not an effectiveness test. But that was then, and this is now. And many admit that we have learned much more about the virus to gain a better understanding. And hopefully this knowledge can help us to prevent ourselves from being fooled by the virus again and waking up surprised. So now let's use the new knowledge from evolving science as a type of acetate overlay, as we use in military intelligence on this situation map, vicinity, Provincetown, Massachusetts. As we continue this discussion next time in the next video, this briefing is unclassified.
I certainly want to echo your comments, but I specifically want to speak to our students and to our staff and let you know that I want to reassure you, as Mr. Goldside said, our policies are remain in effect, will remain in effect, and we will continue to make sure in APS that we do all that is necessary to protect our students and our staff. So students, if you are feeling unsafe, unwelcome in any way, please speak to a trusted adult at your school, your counselor, your principal, and let them know, because we will, and I want to tell all of our leaders, all of our staff, our parents, we are going to continue to follow that and make sure our students are safe. And to staff, I've heard questions and concerns about what should I do, how do I respond. You continue to do what we've been doing. Yes, you continue to stand up for our students. You continue to follow that policy, and you make sure that we are proud of what we've been for many years, a safe place for all of our students. We will not let this get in the way and distract us of continuing to stay focused on why we're all here. For students to learn, to become successful, and to create the future for yourself. That's what we're about, creating a future for our students. We are not going to let this get in the way of that. And again, I want to encourage everyone, as Mr. Goldside said, to provide public comment certainly to the policy, but the model policy, let the governor and the state know it is important to engage in that. But let us all remain focused and do all that we can in our schools, in our community, to protect all of our students, but certainly our transgender, non-binary, and gender-fluid students. So tonight we're speaking specifically about that. Please, we all have a part in making APS, from parents, to staff, to community members. We can and we must continue to make this a safe place. And if anyone in our schools does not provide that safe space for our students, I personally reassure you that we will take care of ensuring that that changes and that students feel safe and can learn in APS. Thank you.
This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.